Isolating variables is one of, if not the most important thing you can do to learn a language effectively. And if you're not doing it, you're learning a language at a much slower rate than you should. So, what exactly do I mean by variable isolation? I mean doing things like pure listening, such as like listening to content without any subtitles. No reading. But the thing is, not just listening in the background, but I mean like listening with all your attention. And then there's the opposite, which is pure reading, which is where you're just reading like a literal book, maybe paperback, or maybe it's like a website or whatever, but there's no audio. So you're unable to rely on the sounds. You have to produce your own sounds. You have to read it in your head. Pure reading. Or pure pronunciation, which is where you're not focused on learning new words. You're not focused on like reading or speaking. You're literally just focused on your pronunciation. I'm going to give you guys examples of how to actually do this stuff, right? And you're going to be pretty much mind blown when I really get into it. But for now, let me explain why most people actually don't do this and why you probably don't do this as much as you should. So most people don't do this because when you have multiple channels of comprehension, it increases your comprehensibility. So if I'm watching a show in a language and I have subtitles, the subtitles help me understand the language because if I can't really hear it well enough, I can read it, right? And oftentimes in language, like especially if you're learning like a language like Japanese or Chinese, you might not even know when you read a word, you might not even know how it's spoken, right? And so when you can hear it spoken at the same time as you hear it written, it makes it easier for you to understand like the reading as well. So they complement each other and they make it easier for you to do both of the tasks. And that's why the easiest way to consume a language is to watch something with subtitles because you get both. So oftentimes people stick to that because that's what gets them to the comprehensibility that they need to be at, right? So if you're normally going to have like 60 or 50% listening comprehension, maybe like 70% reading comprehension, when you put them both together, now you have like 85 to 90% total comprehension, which is really going to put you in that sweet spot for language acquisition. So that's why a lot of people do it. But the crucial mistake that you're making here is you're not accounting for the fact that language is not just about simply comprehending words. Language is a set of skills that you need to build, right? And there's the skill of listening, the skill of pronunciation, the skill of fluency. I've gone over all of this stuff on the channel before, but this is the most important thing to account for. Take a basketball player, for example. When they're practicing to become the best basketball player possible, do they simply just scrimmage or like do practice matches the entire time? No, they isolate specific variables. They do dribbling drills, then there's shooting drills, right? And then more specifically than that, there's individualized drills of like, okay, certain locations that you shoot from, like 3-point shooting drills or free throw drills, right? They drill down as specifically as possible to achieve the best result possible. And that's what you should do when building up your language skills. The more specifically you can drill down on these individual skills, the better that you're going to be. Imagine you have a session where you're talking with a native speaker and you guys are just kind of having a conversation, right? That is highly productive and that's a very good use of your time, right? But how much are you really going to measurably improve from that though? Like, can you really like measurably improve? Maybe you learned like 1 or 2 new words, right? And your skill of speaking, your skill of fluency got a little bit better, right? That's cool. And also your listening ability got a little bit better, right? That's all good. That's good. But imagine if instead of that, you had spent the time specifically improving your pronunciation. So what you did was you took like a 5-second clip of a native speaker saying something and you looped it and you were pronouncing it too and you were recording your own voice and you were pronouncing it over and over again, trying to match their pronunciation as much as you possibly could. And this was really, really difficult. It took you like an hour, but eventually after that hour, you were able to say this like couple sentences, this 5-second clip at the same cadence, the same speed, the same fluency, and nearly the same accent as the native speaker. And you could record yourself saying it, play back the audio, and to your own ears, you sounded basically no accent and you sounded almost just like them. Doing something like that is going to skyrocket your pronunciation if you do that on a long term. You're getting much more pronunciation benefit than if you had just done the tutoring session, right? And that's going to carry over into the rest of your language ability. Now, to make that even better, if you're learning a tonal language, imagine you spent the entirety of that pronunciation training session on the tones that the person was saying. You're going to improve even faster because now you're very specifically targeting tones. Imagine how good your tones are going to get if you do that over the course of a couple months, maybe even 1 month, an hour a day for 1 month. You're going to get way better, and your tones are going to be noticeably better. And if your tones are that much noticeably better, you're just going to be way better at the language in general. On another scale, let's just say you're not learning a tonal language. Maybe let's just say you're learning Spanish and you can't like roll your R's like, you can't do that. Or maybe there's like a specific sound that you're trying to learn in your language that doesn't exist in your target language, like the Japanese R or like the hu sound in Japanese or something like that, right? And what you do, or maybe like a Korean double consonant, I don't even know, whatever it may be for you. And you literally spend like 1 hour like focusing on saying that specific sound over and over again, like a psychopath. Imagine how good you will get at that sound, right? Over the course of a couple weeks, you will be able to say that sound almost just like a native. Going from having that sound being like literally the weakest point of your language ability, where every time you say it, native speakers cringe a little bit, and that sound is in like 1,000 words that you know. Now, anytime you say that sound, it's crisp, it's nearly native level. And your pronunciation of all of those words just goes through the roof, right? The more specific you're able to get, the quicker you can improve on an individual thing. And especially in language learning, these individual little improvements have huge effects on your overall ability, because one sound in a language gets repeated so frequently. It's really, really essential to focus on individual aspect and variable isolation. Because if you spend all of your time just doing things like a general conversation or just watching content, it is good. You're still going to be making progress, but it's just going to be so much slower because you're spreading yourself too thin. So to put all of this into something that's super actionable for you that you can apply today, how do you figure out exactly what you're going to focus on, right? And exactly how you should really do the isolation of your variables. If your focus is effective communication, which it is for probably most of you guys, you need to think and reflect on your own abilities. Maybe you record yourself talking, or maybe ask somebody that you've spoken to in the language before. What's your biggest weakness? You should start there with your biggest weakness. So I've done this before with Vietnamese, and for me, it was my tones. My tones were bad. What I did was I spent a certain period of time focused entirely on tones, and they improved drastically. Still not perfect, right? But they improved drastically. If you just take like 2 minutes to think, you could probably think of like one sound that you don't say well, like one specific letter that you don't pronounce well. And then what you're going to want to do is, just like in my example, you take that one thing that you can't pronounce and you hear audio of a native speaker saying it, and you just listen and repeat over and over again until you got it down. If you're just doing general pronunciation, then it could just be like a phrase. Or if you're trying to do like a specific sound in the language, just take a bunch of different words that use that sound and just listen and repeat those over and over again. If upon reflection you find that your overall pronunciation is actually pretty good, but it's just that like fluency and that effortlessness of speech that you're stuck on, now you have like a lot of options here too. You can do something called shadowing, which is basically where you listen to a native speaker talk and you just try to repeat what they're saying right after they say it. That's kind of difficult. It takes, there's definitely a learning curve there. But if you can get in the habit of practicing it, there's tons of videos. Just search like language shadowing on YouTube. There's tons of videos that teach you how to do that. Focus on that. That's really good for like your fluency. And another really good tip for isolating the variable of like just fluency is taking a specific thing that you often say wrong and then finding other people like, natives saying it right and then drilling that over and over again. Like in Vietnamese, for example, I often mix up the words gung and phi. One of them means like, need to, and then the other one means like have to, right? Like I mix them up all the time. So an example of that for me would be to find sentences that contain both and just listen and repeat to them. So that it really just internalizes the differences, not like trying to study the difference, but just like hearing that one specific sentence structure and pattern and saying it over and over again. That would be really, really helpful. And find something like that in your language that you often mess up and then just drill it over and over again. Don't like try to intellectualize the difference in your head. Like, okay, so if it's this one, then I use this or this, don't think too hard. Just simply listen and repeat and let your brain subconsciously process it, right? That's really, really good. Now, what if your goal isn't communication? What if your goal is reading? This is where it gets kind of tricky because I wouldn't recommend for a lot of people just doing like just straight free flow reading without audio because that can cause problems, right? So I would ask you the question, how much do you care about communication? If you literally don't care about like communicating with people at all and your only goal is literally just to read, then I would say incorporate reading isolation as soon as possible. Literally, like as soon as you can tolerate it, just do it. From the lowest level all the way up, right? Just that's pretty obvious. Just do isolated reading and you're going to get a lot better at reading. Now, if your main goal is reading, but then you also have another goal of like being able to communicate fluently and having a good accent, right? Like that's me with Japanese. My main goal is reading. Like the majority of my time I will ever spend with Japanese is just going to be reading content, right? But I still want to be fluent in Japanese because I like to travel to Japan, and I still want to have a good accent because I don't want to be like fluent with a really bad accent, right? And so that's why, even though my main goal is reading, I'm still not doing any reading isolation currently because I want to have like a really solid accent and a really solid mental model of the language before I start, reproducing it entirely in my own head and, fossilizing any potential bad habits. So if your main goal is like me with Japanese, where you're mainly focused on reading, but you still really want to have a good accent and be able to communicate fluently, I would focus on, from day one, isolating pronunciation. It doesn't have to be like an hour-long thing. You can do it for like 10, 20 minutes a day. Isolate pronunciation on a consistent, regular basis, and then the rest of your time you can just spend reading, but with audio. And once you've gotten to the point where, since you're reading like with audio, so you have like a lot of audio exposure, so you know what the language should sound like, and your pronunciation is super solid and you're not, you're very comfortable with the way it is, then you can start replacing that isolated pronunciation work with isolated reading. But at the end of the day, I think you should always, like, no matter where you are in your language routine, be doing some kind of like isolation practice. And honestly, this might be the most important video that I've ever made. And honestly, like, this is like really, really important stuff. Like, this could literally change the way you learn languages and just skyrocket your progress. So if you haven't done isolation work yet and you're about to start, I'm so happy for you right now, dude. I'm so happy that you're about to make so much more progress. And I hope that you're as excited as I am to really just start implementing this stuff. So if you thought that this video was helpful, which I know it was, you should definitely subscribe to the channel because I provide a lot of value like this on a regular basis. And thank you so much for watching.